Hey everyone, welcome to another ToB Film Club. Today we're going to be reviewing Snyder's Watchmen. Zack Snyder's Watchmen, a polarizing film, I would say, to many. Yeah. And which version are we watching? We're in the director's cut, the ultimate cut. What are we doing here?
We're wavering between the director's cut and the ultimate cut right now. We might, because it's later in the day, not be able to do the Black Friday stuff, but it's undecided at this point.
I would say if time is not an issue to you, watch the ultimate cut or the director's cut with also the Black Friday content. They can be watched separately, but there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to do that. It's still unclear.
It's almost like we should have figured it out before we started recording.
You're right. I take it back. That's me.
Yeah. Hurry up.
Okay, what are we doing?
We got to decide right now whether we're watching the full or just the director's.
8:00. Half an hour.
My vote's for the full version, but it's different for you guys. Whatever. I'm good with just watching the director's cut. Then we have to just not mention Black Friday at all.
Jeremy?
I'm indifferent.
Okay, so ultimate cut it is. Okay.
Who needs sleep?
Says the guy who can't sleep. Hey everyone, welcome to another ToB Film Club. This week it's not even this week. This is a bonus episode. It's a bonus episode. So this time we're going to be reviewing Zack Snyder's Watchmen. And this is a very polarizing film, or has been considered to be over the years. And it felt apropos because not only is HBO's Watchmen happening right now, but we're also doing a recap series on that television show. So, and also we do a ToB Film Club thing for the Patreon subscribers. If you didn't know, and if you were not a Patreon subscriber, you head over to patreon.com/TowerBabblecast and subscribe for as little as $5 a month. That's one coffee, really, from Starbucks. And you get access to at least one monthly bonus content, which is, for the last several months, has been a film club episode. And that's what we're going to be doing today, giving you guys an example of what that looks like in a format that only makes sense because, again, the show is on right now. So patreon.com/TowerBabblecast is where you're going to be able to get access to that. What movies have we done in the past, Dan? Looper
was the last month. We did Jurassic Park was the first one. Breakfast Club,
Big Lebowski.
Ooh, the Big Lebowski was good.
Like a varied list.
Yeah.
Next month, or this month, rather, towards the end of the month, is Mystic River.
Mm-hmm. So if you want access to that, again, that's the Patreon. But we're going to give you guys a little taste, a little teaser here. And this is, again, this is for everybody. This is for if you are a Tower Babble podcast listener, if you just listen to our Watchmen recaps, whatever it might be, this is for you. So we're going to do, just give you a quick idea of what the format's like. What the film club does is we do a quick preamble of the movie, quickly talk about what our thoughts and feelings are going into it, having not seen it before, or sometimes not seen it for a long time, or whatever it might be. We watch the movie, we come back, immediately provided a review. So there's no digesting of really of the film. It's more of a stream of consciousness, what we kind of came out of it thinking. And that's kind of the idea is that you can do the same, as you can listen to the first part of the show, kind of think about your thoughts in going in the movie, and then pause it, go watch the movie, come back and listen to it right after. That's kind of the idea. It's a community experience.
Right.
So that's what we're going to be doing today for Zack Snyder's Watchmen. Daniel, Jeremy, what year did this movie come out?
2010, I believe.
2009, I believe.
Oh, 2009.
Okay. And yes, 2009. And I distinctly remember going to the theater to see this movie with you two.
I don't remember it at all.
And just coming out of the movie saying, what the fuck was that? I had no idea what the fuck had just happened.
Because at that point you hadn't read the book.
I hadn't read the book. I thought, oh, cool, a superhero movie. And I watched it and I was like, what? This is the most confusing shit I've ever seen in my entire life. That was how I felt in 2009 when I saw that movie for the first time. I've obviously seen it again since.
Mm-hmm.
And I still kind of feel that way, that I think that it's fairly obtuse for people who have not read the book. I ultimately feel like this is a movie ahead of its time, and I've said this for years and years and years, and we'll see how much my opinions have changed, and I haven't seen it in several years. But a movie that does a attempt at skewering the superhero genre in a way, right? And the movie itself came out at a time when superhero movies weren't at the peak that they are now. Superhero movies are the movies now, right? You go to the movies, it's almost going to be a
cinema.
It's well, let's not get into that debate. But a lot of the blockbuster films now are just dominated by superhero movies.
Yeah. And even the ones that weren't superhero movies have kind of become that. I'm thinking Fast and Furious.
Yeah, right? So imagine a movie like this, like Watchmen, coming out today or 3, 4, 5 years ago even.
So the thing about Watchmen is it's very much a commentary on the superhero genre. It's sort of holding a mirror up to it, and maybe you could argue a more realistic or gritty version of it, which has become popular in film and cinema now, like gritty reboots, blah, blah, blah. Watchmen's not a reboot. It's an examination. It's a breakdown of what this would look like if these were real people with real issues in real life.
And it redefined the comic book medium.
That too.
And storytelling as well.
100%.
So I just think that the movie itself came out at the wrong time. It was too soon. It wasn't for the general movie-going audiences. They hadn't been exposed to years and years and years of comic book storytelling. I just feel like the impact of that would have just been so much greater if that movie had come out today. Ultimately,
potentially, but you also have the comic book fans who were divided as well. Whereas I think me and Dan came off of it as it's basically the best interpretation, like a literal interpretation you could ever do. It didn't veer off the beaten path like at all, basically, except for the end.
Very end, yeah.
But when you see it as a self-contained story anyways, where it doesn't go anywhere after, it felt fine at the time. Because as readers too, like the squid monster thing is one of those weird, quirky things that doesn't necessarily pay off the way you think it should when Adrian Veidt is like, yes, I did it. It just doesn't have that presence, that build up.
Yeah, even in the comics, and it's teased in the comics and comic book in general, you have more freedom to be, extraordinary with this kind of stuff. It felt out of place. It felt like that was too fantastical, I would say.
But it was meant to be an alien threat that brought the nations together. In this movie, we know that it was pinned on Dr. Manhattan, his powers, his abilities, and massive explosions happen all throughout the world. Right. Pinning it on him, making every nation kind of come together.
It makes much more sense, especially the fact that it affects other countries, not just the States.
Yes.
It's one of those examples, and there are very few of these in my mind that I can recall, but like in Spider-Man 1, another great example of this is that they made the webs actually come out of his arm instead of having it be like a thing that he built.
Yes.
It just simplifies things and makes it more digestible for a movie audience.
Yeah. Not adding another layer on top of it, especially for a long, meaty movie where they can't import everything from the source material.
Exactly. Aside from that, I think this is a very faithful adaptation, and we'll get into it after we watch
the
movie.
mean, that's been considered a critique of it actually in the past, is that it's too faithful to the source material, to the point where to its detriment that it becomes obtuse.
But it's known as a product that is virtually it can't translate away from that medium.
Well, it's
an unmakeable movie. It's unadaptable over and over again. That's why I praise this version and appreciate this version, that we just have a straight up verbatim, basically live action version of it, which Snyder brought to the table with 300, but added extra stuff to that.
Right, and I think there's interesting. You bring up Spider-Man. I think it's a really good example. It actually kind of speaks a little bit to what I was saying before, which is that what do the new Spider-Man movies do? They respect the audiences enough to say he's going to build web slingers because we understand, like, the audiences can accept that. We don't need to dumb it down for them.
Now they can.
Yeah, now they can. And that comes back to this movie coming ahead of its time.
Right.
Is that, if this movie had come out today, I think that necessity to quote unquote dumb it down or simplify it wouldn't necessarily be as important.
But also it's a period piece and it takes place in a different time. So it might not be as relevant as the show is more relevant today, right?
I just think, imagine if this movie had come out 2 years ago and this show was coming out now. I think that what the impact of that would be very different, regardless of the the reception. I think the reason the show comes so much further after the movie is because the reception of the movie itself was pretty mixed, and that they needed time and space.
It didn't make a ton of money
Yeah.
either, but again, me and Daniel come off of just reading the comic and then seeing this come to life from this this visionary director that kind of shook our world at when we were young, right?
Yeah, that's fair to say.
With 300 and just what he brings to the table, and we just thought it was awesome.
I've seen 300 in theaters more than any other movie. I saw it once when I was actually like sick, like I was fully ill, like almost ready to throw up, but you guys wanted to go see the movie again, so fuck it, here we go. I was so uncomfortable watching the movie. But yeah, is that like Jeremy brings a great point. Zack Snyder leaves a visual impact on you no matter what you are watching.
Right. And then before we were recording, I kind of came to the realization that his stuff just looks so good that it's open for critique around the things that he doesn't necessarily do as good. It doesn't hold. But this isn't his story, though. That's the thing with this one in particular.
Yeah.
Is that because it's unadaptable, you're going to get the critique no matter what, because you left this out, you did this, you changed this, blah, blah, blah. But again, I think me and Dan fall in the camp where we see this as sacred, just as the graphic novel. And we don't really have too many complaints with it, except for maybe the music choices.
There's a couple music cues
thing
that I don't like, but other than that, no, it's a good movie. It's not the same as the comic. They're separate,
different.
not equal, but
that's why I think the music brings a different level to it, because it brings the period into it from taking movies from that timeline that you don't get when you're reading it.
I think it's important. I think that
it makes it flow too. Like they're quick transitions, these scenes. Like
that's true.
The funeral scene, like it's bits and pieces. They do a lot of
let's not dive
recapping.
Let's not dive too deep into like the specific scenes until we've seen the movie. And this is just kind of
and one more thing,
stuff.
the casting. Zack Snyder's casting is one of the best ever. Dr. Manhattan, unbelievable. Rorschach, unbelievable.
Jackie Earle Haley is Rorschach.
Amazing.
Has he done anything else?
Billy Crudup is Dr. Manhattan.
Billy Crudup, I think he might be my favorite. Rorschach is up there too. Yeah. But even Night Owl, like just a perfect job of what he had to work with, what that character is. And then Silk Spectre, nothing to rave about. But again, in the comic, that's who she was.
Yep.
And was her purpose. Which is why it's cool with the Watchmen series, seeing Laurie Blake, the same character, evolve.
Right. She's coming to her own now. She's not acting under.
Again, I just don't want to dive too deep into this stuff before we've seen it. So I think on that note, let's watch the movie, and we'll come back. And this is the ultimate cut of Zack Snyder's Watchmen.
So we'll see you in 3.5 hours.
Oh my God.
Watchmen. One of us died tonight. Somebody knows why. Somebody knows.
I heard he'd been working for the government. Maybe it was a political killing.
Maybe someone's picking off costumed heroes.
John thinks that there's going to be a nuclear war.
What if that's why someone wants us out of the way? So we can't do anything to stop it. An attack on one is an attack on all of us.
Watchmen are over. What do you suggest we do about it?
Retribution.
We can save this world.
That movie's so long.
Well, it's definitely much longer with all the extra stuff in there.
Like, it takes so much out of you.
It's late at night. We're gonna try to not be low energy, but that was a whole.
It's just
journey.
Man, that's a lot. It's a lot, and I think okay. So you guys have seen this movie a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it less than half as many. Probably is fair. I don't know.
This is probably your second time seeing it.
This is my third time seeing the movie. So I have probably a different perspective, but I think this story doesn't work as told in even a 3.5 hour movie. It's too much. It's just a series of events, like one after another, that feel ultimately pretty disjointed and disconnected and hard to follow. That if imagined as a series would, I think, not only do justice to the source material more, but also just be much more effective as a storytelling medium. It just doesn't work in the constraints of one movie. I think that, I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to sort of like intellectually separate myself from knowing what I know,
Right.
and as a having read the comic and having watched it a million times, and like trying to imagine from an outside perspective of somebody having not seen it or not familiar with the comic, and
Mhm.
yeah, I can see how it's illegible. Like
It's too much. And like there's so many awesome moments in there, but because they get lost in, like, it's like mixing like ice cream and cake and cookies and all those, like, everything, and nerds and candy into one bowl. It's
This
all great
sounds
stuff.
fantastic.
It's all great separate, but together is just too much. It doesn't work as one item, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. Jeremy, what'd you think?
Yeah, I can see that too. It's hard for me to separate myself from reading the book first, I
Mhm.
guess, because my experience watching it is so heavily relied on that experience of that story, learning everything from that read, that I just feel like the movie does the best job it can in extrapolating all those beats
Mhm.
in a pretty seamless way, especially in the first half. I think it's pretty slick,
Mhm.
but then it does drag a little bit with its explanations, and then Ozymandias he's just like the whole final, like the end, basically his explanation. But I think the actor does a really good job selling it, regardless of the direction he was told
He was
to
like
take it.
be very like monotone and like non-emotive, like.
But that emotion, I think, comes through towards the end, like specifically in his eyes. I think his name's Matthew Good. I just think he's a little
Yeah, sounds right.
underrated and just kind of boxed into the stereotypical villain. He even says, right, I'm not the classic comic book villain, but clearly is. Again, with keeping with the theme with jokes. So I kind of saw his performance a bit differently with this viewing.
That's interesting. Yeah, he's always in my mind been like, we talk about the performances, and his number one is like
Mhm.
Jackie Earl Haley
Yeah.
as Rorschach, Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan. I think
Mhm.
very not necessarily underrated, because I think people respect the performance, but Patrick Wilson as Night Owl is phenomenal. in this
I think
movie.
Patrick Wilson could have easily been like a great Superman, you know?
Yeah.
He's got
Yeah.
the chin for it, certainly. And like his look is very like Clark Kent-esque, obviously. And I think that's on purpose probably to some degree, but like,
Yeah, in the comic, he was even more indistinguishable from being a superhero. He was like more overweight, stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
and it just like, so he works, I think, really well as being like a grounded person who got caught up in this
Yeah.
this idea of fighting crime and then just couldn't let
He
go.
plays the bit perfect.
Yeah.
No
I think, yeah.
complaints
Yep.
with him.
I don't know if there's I don't know if there's a lot of bad performances in the. No,
No,
I can't
mean,
think of any.
For me, like Billy Crudup and Dr. Manhattan, it's mesmerizing pretty much every time I watch it.
Right.
I don't get the knock on the eyes, the white eyes, and all that stuff. Like I think it looks.
No,
it
I
looks
think that's
good.
fair. I didn't, and so I guess that's maybe a good place to kind of take it. So I think more than most people, Jeremy, you're probably familiar with what the general, not consensus is, but what some of the more widely held criticisms of the movie.
Yeah.
And like, maybe we can go through some of those and see like where you come down or where we come down on
Sure.
them. And maybe we can start there. Is there people out there who think that Billy Crudup's performance isn't good, or it's not, it's too cold, or like what's the kind of criticism there?
I think it's mostly just on the look, like the visual aspect of it.
They just don't like seeing the blue dick hanging around.
No,
Maybe.
that's very much.
No,
the
they did want to
comics.
see that. No, you're right. You're right. Okay. I mean, I thought he looked fine. I was thinking about this from a movie that came out in 2009. The effects are basically seamless. Like and I think that mostly because it's mostly practical stuff.
Yeah, he's very slick with seaming those together with practical.
Yeah, so I think that was really good. It'll hold up visually for like a long time, and if we can just quickly talk, we watched it on a secondhand Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray player, on my new TV, and it looked pretty great. Like it's gorgeous as a movie, right? And we can talk that to death. It's a basically perfect looking
and that's
movie.
also due to the original comic with the color palette.
Mm-hmm.
It's translated pretty uniquely with the night scenes with all those neon lights and stuff,
Mhm.
and the rain and the water, all that stuff.
Yeah, and obviously they do a good job of translating some of those iconic, like the blues and the yellows as being kind of really important.
And the purples.
Yeah, so I think that's cool. Okay, so what's another critique of the film? We kind of talked on one of them already about it being kind of overwrought a little. What's another?
Yeah, I mean, the feeling of being disjointed is pretty heavily.
I think what that
believed.
comes from, though, I was thinking about it while we were watching, is like
Yeah.
the book itself. It's a series of comics, right? So when you read it in graphic novel format, they're like each a chapter,
Right.
So like there's the chapter, the funeral, and they get everybody's perspective on the comedian. Then there's a whole chapter of Manhattan on Mars and all that stuff.
I love all that stuff.
It's
too.
it's phenomenal in the book, and it's great in the movie too. But if you're not familiar with the book, I think it can feel like there's
where
these chapters
going?
there's no segue.
Yeah,
No-
it does, and I think that's part of the problem is it doesn't feel like there's a through line, right? It kind of feel like, okay, now we're at the funeral, and then it's cutting back and forth between all these moments. And that's how the book did it. But for a movie, you need some more forward momentum to keep people from losing track of even like the timeline of what the hell is going on.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
I think honestly, as much as I enjoyed the Black Freighter stuff, I think that kind of made it worse in this version of this cut of the movie.
Right.
Mind you, this is the first time I've seen this version of it.
Mhm.
But like when it cut to the Black Freighter stuff, it felt very out of place, and it felt like so separate, and like cutting back from it, the movie now feels even more disjointed as a result.
Right.
Because you take a break from something and then jump back into something, and it doesn't.
Yeah,
it
it
doesn't feel
definitely
like it
adds
follows.
to that confusion.
I did like how they cut it in. I think they do a good job.
It started
with that.
off pretty good.
Yeah, they'd use a couple. They do some good job at like a couple moments where they pull out of the cartoon onto the comic page and out.
Mhm.
I like that, or vice versa. But that only happens a couple times, and there's once in a while it's just like literally just cut to cartoon right after a scene, which is like very, disorienting. Okay, what else? Let's talk about we're talking about Black Freighter. Let's talk about the Black Freighter. I'm sure you guys have had time to think about this over the years, but like in context of the film, you say you don't think it works as being a part of the movie. I would agree with that. I think there's no way you could release a movie like that in theaters. It would it'd be worse than it was in terms of ineffective storytelling.
Definitely.
But as a side piece, what do you guys think of it as an animation, a piece of animation, or the way it was done?
I thought it looked pretty gorgeous at times, actually.
Mhm.
Not a lot of times. And Gerard Butler, just like the same.
He's doing his Gerard Butler
Yeah.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah, the voice acting is great. The animation's all right too. They took a few liberties with it. It's not the exact Black Freighter story
What's
from
different?
the comics. It's a bit more on the nose, I would say. Like having him actually physically talking with a dead man wasn't in the comic. It was a bit more subtle in the comic. That was definitely the implication. But this, it was, and I guess because it had to be more streamlined and had to be created separately for the movie, it's just a slightly different story. That's fine. It's not. It doesn't have to be verbatim.
Does the changes to the story fit the changes to the larger story?
Yes, and like the thing about it is it's always been the Black Freighter thing was always sort of a commentary on what's happening in that chapter of the Watchmen book.
See, and I don't feel like that comes through.
It doesn't in the movie. I don't think.
Here, I think it just comes to relate to anybody, whatever their plan is. There's some sort of sacrifice, I think, that's going on, and it's like the level of sacrifice who's willing to make, and Ozymandias is willing to make the biggest one,
Right.
and I think
Interesting,
that
okay.
might relate to the Black Freighter in terms of.
I kind of read it differently. I kind of took it more as like being obsessed with a plan or being obsessed with something, and then letting that thing change you and like to the point where you're unrecognizable. So like Veidt has this plan, and he goes through all these like, and he explains at the end, right? He's like, and then I had to do this and I had to do that to make the plan work. And a lot of those things are pretty dark and grim. And he let those kind of things win because the plan had to happen.
Yeah, he
Right.
had an ultimate goal, and
Yeah.
all the ends justify the means. This comes down to it's very much like there's that Nietzsche quote in the book. I believe they reference it in the movie, but the classic battle not with monsters lest ye become a monster.
Mm.
And if you stare too long into the abyss also stares into you. That's what's happened. That's the whole story of the Black Freighter is him.
Well, at the very end of the
Basically,
Black
corruption.
Freighter in this, it's like as a beast, live with beasts or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how much did we talk about this before? I mean, feels like a lifetime ago before the movie, but did we talk about the change of the squid from the squid to the
So
Manhattan
I guess
explosion?
maybe not in depth. I think this is one of the few changes that I think makes sense, especially for a movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, the end, he's divulging the huge plan, and then like how comical would it be? I guess that may be the point.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, he just reveals that he has this massive alien that's going to drop down,
Right.
to distract everybody. And how believable is that going to sound?
yeah.
coming from all this stuff, and then that's the plan. I think it just makes more sense that he utilizes Dr. Manhattan.
Right. But yet we live in a world where we're watching a Watchmen television show where they're like, yeah, there was a giant squid that dropped down on New York, and everyone's fine to live with that or to believe that, and we can
Yeah.
just say, take it in stride.
The other reason it works though is that it's not just New York that's affected. In the comics, it's just New York.
Yeah, which doesn't really make any as much sense, right?
Well, I thought about that too. 'Cause if it were just a bomb that went off in New York, the Soviets wouldn't care and it wouldn't change
Right.
anything, right? But the fact in the comics that it's like an extra dimensional being means that there's an other now. There's an alien that
Right.
is killing humans.
Right.
And there's so much more that goes into that squid though that like you would need another Black Freighter sequence
Yeah.
like every third
Right.
scene.
Which is again like why it just keeps coming back to this. It's like if you have to change so much of the source material of a thing that you didn't want to change to make into the movie, why even make the movie?
Well,
You know?
that comes from the company and the execs wanting this property that they own that they can make money off of.
Right.
Anybody to make something.
It's a Warner Brothers
Yeah.
decision.
Like they approached Damon Lindelof for a TV series like over and over again. And he
Right.
said yes. So that's why I think you can't really fault Zack Snyder for literally just taking it for
Well,
what it is.
It's like if he didn't do it, someone else would have done it. You know, and maybe
might
done it
not have
worse.
looked-
I don't
might not
know.
have looked as cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's tough. Like I almost feel
Paul
like
Greengrass was actually going to be the making the Watchmen before Zack Snyder, and I think it's online now.
His script?
He has actual test footage they filmed with like someone dressed up as Rorschach and stuff, getting some of the cinematography down.
that would have been a very different movie, obviously.
Yeah,
I think it kind of. I feel like it's hard for me to even recommend this movie to someone watching the TV show. Like beforehand, if you watch this movie and then watch the TV show, I think you'll be more confused than if you just watch the TV show.
It gives you some much needed context because the show itself is also undecipherable for a large period of the
yeah.
season.
We're only 4 episodes in. Like I would
Yeah.
recommend watch this, then start the show.
Yeah.
Maybe.
if anything, to get an idea of
Just
what masks are.
Even an understanding of the characters that are being referenced.
Yeah, I
constantly.
guess like you'd understand Laurie Blake a little bit more, who I don't think comes off great in the movie.
Well, her character is very much underfoot in
Yeah.
the movie and in the book.
Yeah, this show is like giving her that character like a major comeback.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your let's stop talking negatively. What's your favorite thing in the other than Billy Crudup just talking?
I was just kind of reminded again during the beginning just how slick it is, and with the music choices. Like I'm one of the people who like enjoy every single music choice that's there, especially the beginning,
Especially the 99
especially that one.
Yeah.
Especially that one, eh?
I just think it gives it flavor in a way that the comic book medium lacks in that area.
Yeah, we've talked about this so many times.
Yeah.
You just being able to cue music to comics is like an
Right.
amazing thing if you can get it done.
And I think it's done really well in the beginning of this film. And
That being said, would you listen to those musical choices when watching or when reading that comic if you hadn't seen the movie?
if I hadn't seen,
Like
the movie-
if you were just putting music to Watchmen,
well, along the Watchtower is pretty.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
apt.
Yeah.
And like the utilization of that song is badass in this
Yeah.
movie.
I think I'm basically with you. I think there's basically all good. I don't like the 99 red balloons is like on for like half a second. Like it's not even.
Yeah.
It's
And
barely.
it's not. It's to surround a date. And this
It's
picture
to set tone.
of
Yeah.
Dan when he like even in the comic, right? It's like a huge square and he's like a massive smile.
Okay. Yeah.
So like, also when we watch it, I'm sure for you too, Daniel, like you get glimpses of what the actual comic book panel.
Well, sometimes
like,
they
like,
literally
and even
slow
the difference.
down. Like they like go super slow mo to be like, hey, look at how much this looks like a still image.
Yeah,
You know, that's
there's some that are like that aren't that obvious. But yeah, they pop up every now and then. I think that is the best that it can be if it's doing that.
Yeah.
To be able to translate it to a 3-hour movie.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I think you're right. It does an admirable job doing a job that's basically
and throughout
impossible.
it,
Yeah. Daniel, do you have a favorite moment?
It varies. Like we'll be watching the Manhattan on Mars scene, and I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. This is the best part of the book. And then we'll jump from that to Rorschach in prison, and then like, this is the coolest part of the book, or part of the movie. Like, so it varies. I think just in broad strokes, this is a very faithful and it's a great adaptation of the source material. All that other stuff, like there's that whole thing in the book about Max Shade, who's the writer of the Black Freighter, who actually wrote something for the squid monster. Like there's this whole subplot.
Well, and the therapist gets just the short stick here.
Yeah, that's true too.
Like hard.
There's a whole
chapters,
subplot about him and his marriage, and how him analyzing Rorschach is affecting his marriage and affecting his psychology.
Yeah, it's like
there's
mirrored.
so
It's like
many things
mirrored
going
onto
on.
him.
Yeah.
Huh.
And then Doomsday Clock picks that up with the therapist's son,
Right.
who, spoilers, kind of takes on the mantle of Rorschach in a really cool way.
Right.
Different sequel.
Different sequel.
Very different type of sequel.
More comic booky.
Plays off that idea of maybe I'll go create life.
But here's the fucked up thing about Doomsday Clock. Sorry.
Which made me think more about this Watchmen series with those babies.
Yeah, I was also thinking that too.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
I was
Shrew, and
literally
Lady Shrew,
exact. Whoa. But this isn't the show. Okay, Dan, what were you gonna say?
Well,
Sorry.
it's not a Doomsday Clock podcast, but the messed up thing is that
Should be.
and in the book, in Watchmen, in that universe, DC Comics exist. Superman, the comic book character, exists.
Really?
So yeah. So the idea is that there were superhero comics at a time, but then once Masked Avengers, like once the vigilante thing became a reality, they were less popular. So pirate comics became more popular.
Right,
And that's where
right.
Black Freighter is one of the more popular.
It's like It's like the opposite of the boys, where like real life superheroes makes superheroes more popular.
So that's why Doomsday Clock is fucked up, because Manhattan was alive and reading Superman comic books as Superman being a fictional character, and now he's in a universe with Superman. Again, it's not neither here nor there, but it's not necessarily connected to the movie.
No, not at all.
More sort of the character of Dr. Manhattan.
Sorry?
More sort of the character of Dr.
Yeah.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
My favorite part of the movie, if I can, because I was asking you guys, my favorite part of the movie is,
And we're supposed to ask you.
well, yeah, I was hoping, was Dr. Manhattan's like origin story. I think the music's so
Yeah.
fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like the visuals are like amazing and so eerie.
And that's a perfect example of the
Yeah.
translation from the book to screen, because they go back and forth between all those dates he's mentioning. And the movie does a really good job going back and forth with his relationship with Janie.
Just trying to think, like, imagine that as like an episode of one episode of a like 10 episode
it'd be
series.
amazing,
It'd be
yeah.
like cool, like you would just like it'd be
'Cause
amazing.
then you would just focus on like just their love like longer, right?
Yep.
Rather than a
It
sequence.
feels so fast. She does not matter as a character in the movie. It just like she has like 3 lines basically the entire film.
Talk about Janie.
Yeah.
Well, even when you first meet her, right? We first meet her when
She like
has
appears.
cancer.
No, I know. She
Don't?
just appears next to Dr. Manhattan in a flashback when they all get the Watchmen
that's
all
the
get
first
together.
time, yeah.
But she doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then you're like, who the fuck is this person? And then cancer. So okay. Yeah, I just feel like we're seeing a lot of negative stuff. There is still a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
in
it should be
here.
clear. Like I watch this movie at least once a year, every year since the movie came
You
out.
gotta, either watch the
Probably
movie
twice
once
a
a
year.
year or read the book.
Yeah, both often. And it's one of my favorite fandoms or whatever. I hate using that term, but that's what we use. out there. But yeah, there's the movie. There's a lot to pick apart with the movie. There's a lot of holes to poke.
Yeah, and like I guess it's like I understand some of the like vitriol around everything. And Zack Snyder, just for some reason, for whatever reason, he seems to find these spots, in the world, in the world of fandoms and nerd culture that just attract this type of like enhanced feeling of like attachment to something, right? And I don't, and maybe he just attached to those same properties in the same way that those people are, but for whatever reason, when he just finds these things. So Watchmen's one of them, and there's some people who fucking hate this movie, and there's some people who love it and will defend it to their death, and then there's a lot of people in between. But those people at the other end, they are very loud, and the same thing is true about the Justice League stuff. And like, I don't know if that's a Zack Snyder thing or it's the properties, and I honestly don't know, but I understand the Watchmen stuff because the book is obviously so great, right? And it does such a good job of telling this story in a much better way. So when someone comes out and says this movie, an almost word for word adaptation, as much as they can do in a 3-hour movie, comes out and there's people who are like, this movie sucks. People get upset about that kind of thing. They defensive, right? Which doesn't necessarily make sense, but is just like a fact of the way people act. So I get that, but it's like, man, with this one, it's like it's from 10 years ago, right? And people are still talking about it, fairly regularly. And obviously the TV show helps that, but like it's pretty crazy. I think it's left a legacy.
Yeah, it's something that people are passionate about. And that's a testament to the quality of the source material. I don't think that that's a Zack Snyder problem or a Watchmen or a Game of Thrones problem. It's like toxic fandom problem. It's people that think that they have ownership over these things.
Yeah, which actually ultimately led to Zack Snyder's breakup with Warner Brothers to a degree with Justice League. There's like reports that execs were on social medias and kind of fell into what people were saying, with a difference between not being more like Marvel.
So was there like a divide in the boardroom between people who felt like Snyder had a vision?
Yeah, they ultimately went with the decision to try to correct the course,
right,
to go towards the
in the middle
Marvel
of production,
because of social media and what people were saying. The much louder minority of something hating something, right? They paid attention to that, and that was the ultimate demise for Zack Snyder.
Yeah, I'm not here to talk shit about Zack Snyder. He makes good looking movies, and not all those movies are amazing. They don't always make perfect sense, and they open themselves up. Jeremy, you talked before we recorded, they open themselves up for critique, but often because they have things that are pretty obviously critiques. So like, I don't want to make this about like, does Zack Snyder, he seems to find himself into these. I don't know why. It's just kind of that's where we are right now. This movie itself, I don't know how much he gets flack for it specifically. I don't, if very little, probably. He kind of, it's not that he's just like a shooter, like you said. Like, he's not just someone given a script and go out and make this movie. He had some vision, in it. It makes a huge difference in what the movie looks like, which is, I think, its some of its best feature, which is that it looks great. But he was just given an impossible task, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, he signed up for it. And I think he knew going in that it was an impossible task. Everybody couldn't. There's no way to imagine a version of that book in a 3-hour movie. It's like you said, like for sure, a TV show would make much more sense. Give you time to really flesh these things out and explore the characters, because a lot of what happens in the movie is just this scene and now scene 2, scene 4, scene 6, and there's not a lot of connection. There's not a lot of explanation between the lines.
And that's the unadaptable part that is just it's just impossible. So what you have and what they give us, I think you can see a lot of care, attention to detail is put into so many, like the whole thing, to where what we do get seems pretty seamless, may feel disjointed if you don't know where it's coming from, where it's leading to, but everything is just very well put there.
Mhm.
and then it has a certain slickness to how it flows, specifically in the beginning with the comedian's funeral and how
Mhm.
they go off onto the other characters, kind of teach you about them and their past, and then it just gets bogged down a little bit
Yeah.
by getting to the final plan.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just think the care, the effort, the attention to detail, it's all there. Even the special features and stuff. Like they had the book on set, everyone's reading it, everyone was involved with making sure the backgrounds, the cities, the cars.
Mhm.
They were fans, and I think they did the best they could, just put it into a 3 hour window,
Mhm.
and they picked and choose what they thought would work best, made it look slick. And like you said, we're still talking about it. It's still, liked by many, hated by many, but it's still talked about, still
Mhm.
referenced.
Yeah, it
Um,
endures.
yeah.
I think it's pre-peak. It's pre-peak TV or golden. I think peak
Yeah.
TV is kind of the
Yeah.
accepted nomenclature now. But like, um, if this, put us in 10 years ago, but the TV landscape was like it is now, I think it's more likely this would be made into an HBO series. You know, um, I would like. I bet you there's still execs that would, if you talk to a Warner Brothers exec, I bet you there's some that said like we probably should have made this a TV series, or I pitched it as a TV series or whatever. So
Well, I think they're doing the right pathway to get there. You do this, you do something that shows that you can do something new in a sequel to
Yeah.
it. That you're relying so heavily on the source material.
Do a prequel.
Another season, it could be a prequel. It's like
yeah,
Spartacus. They did the prequel.
they did do the
second season,
prequel. Yeah,
and it
yeah.
fleshes out the characters that they mentioned, or the characters.
One of the
that-
better seasons too, I'd
Yeah.
argue. Yeah.
So they could redo. Yeah, they could really hit those chapters in an episodic format.
And you can almost tie it into something that's happening in whatever your version of
Yeah.
the sequel is. Yeah. I don't know. That could
Maybe
be
not
interesting.
too much, because I think you
Yeah.
want
Gotta
to
be
still
careful
keep
with
it
that.
pretty sacred. But maybe they want to do something new because they respect this version,
Yeah, I mean, like,
but not necessarily because the ending. They can't use this.
yeah,
Right.
it
If they-
can't, like,
they have to refilm
exactly.
certain things if they're going to keep the show going.
They could, yeah.
To go back and reference where it came from.
This has to stand on its own. If you want to retell moments of the story, you can't use footage from this movie.
No.
It just doesn't. It doesn't really fit.
And already it's pretty apparent with Ozymandias
Yeah.
with Jeremy Irons putting on
his suit.
the essential suit
Yeah.
from the comic itself, right? Nothing.
Although
not,
Ozymandias' suit in the movie is pretty cool looking. It's
It's
like
alright.
it's very much like
I think they could have got away with just the gold ring instead of that chunky
yeah, maybe.
kind of headset he had on.
I think that might be another one of the critiques. Again, not to speak too negatively, is that it looks too much like an actual superhero outfit versus the one from the comics and the one that we see in the show. It feels a little bit more amateur, and it's more because he has a flair for the theatrical and the dramatic. Like it's the suit that he has in the movie looks like a superhero movie's suit.
Sure,
if that makes
yeah.
sense.
But I think that's a kind of the point, though,
Yeah,
right?
I think that is the point.
Yeah.
And I also seen that the studio wanted like a lot more changes and to emphasize certain things to just be vastly different. But Zach and his team
They're like,
were
no.
adamant
Yeah.
about just ripping it straight out of the comic.
What did
So
you
it could have been a lot worse.
What did you guys make of like? So there's supposed to be only one Superman, right? That's Dr. Manhattan. Yet, not only can Ozymandias throw a 215-pound man through a like 5-pane glass window, or whatever the hell they say,
Yeah.
and like some of the crazy shit from like the action, which is a little just super over the top sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that's due
yeah.
to it having to be a superhero movie and have those action set pieces.
But doesn't it like?
And then flare them up. Like,
Doesn't
you
it
can't
take
just-
away from the idea of these are just regular people trying to do this stuff in the world? Then it because otherwise
no,
it just
I
feels like
think-
superheroes
I
again.
think it's just
yeah.
part of the theatric experience. I think they needed and they all wanted to have that flair in there. They weren't thinking to be super like R-rated.
Yeah, I guess,
smooth
but like
about
you
it.
you show
They should've-
like
I think they should have been.
you show like the comedian, he like punches through a brick wall. He punch in the first scene when he's getting when him and Vite are fighting.
Yeah.
He punches through his brick wall.
Yeah, but
That's,
but what about Batman? Like you could see a scenario where Batman's fighting and that happens,
Right, but this is-
because he needs to have that
The idea
that
is that,
emphasis of power
Yeah.
because they are somewhat superheroes, but not with superpowers. Like they can't be brittle.
yeah, the
Right.
idea is that they're
The
like
theatrics
peak
that
human
happen.
physical fitness and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff. So it's possible technically to punch
Yeah.
through a wall. It would hurt. Like it's not, but it's not it doesn't make them a superhero. They're just a person that's
No,
really
I get that.
strong.
I just feel like there. I feel like it takes away a little bit from the message of what they're trying to like say.
I agree.
I think the goal though is just to establish the rules, and you see it right away.
Yeah, that I
And then
think.
they're established, and then you go from there. Okay, it's just a heightened sense of if a comic world did exist, it'd have to be heightened a little bit for them
Mhm.
to be able to make those jumps from building to building,
Right, or
and all
catch
that
a
stuff.
bullet.
Because, yeah,
Which happens in the comic, by the way.
Right.
That wasn't made up for the movie.
Mm.
yeah.
And
they
I think-
kept that in. A lot of people think they should not.
Well,
kept
because
that
it's
in.
ridiculous. And that's like the one that's like the most like he might as well be a superhero if he can do that.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff in the comic is very much implied. It's just not explicitly shown. So like that's another one of the critiques is that this is too much an action hero movie.
Mm.
There's some really cool sequences, and Zack Snyder's great at these
I
sequences.
thought I remembered that sequence in the jail being way cooler than it was, and it feels kind of silly in the.
That was pretty cool.
I watched it this time. I don't know. I did like some of the stuff that they do. Obviously, and it's probably straight from the comic, but with the little guy in the like the flapping door, you know,
Oh, big figure. Yeah.
figure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. But again, that's probably straight from the comic because you
Yeah.
can easily see that
Oh, it
being
is.
used as a comic.
Yeah, it's
thing.
3
Yeah.
panels.
I like that, and obviously there's allusions to that in the show. that we
The
just watched.
Rorschach
Yeah.
escape when he gets caught. I think it's pretty slick.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like no.
Yeah, it's just it heightened sense of just franticness.
Yeah.
And then being kind of a MacGyver, grabbing the
Mhm.
matches,
Mhm.
the aerosol,
Mhm.
and then that cool shot of him like sliding, lighting the matches is in the comic too. I think it's really effective here.
Mhm. Okay, anything else we should say about this film? Maybe not necessarily the book, but the movie itself.
Here's a question.
Okay.
This will create some controversy potentially. What do you think of Vight's plan, like as a numbers game? It's killing millions to save billions, right or wrong?
Right.
Well, I guess in the world that he's in the world of the show or the movie or the book, I guess, the threat of nuclear war is much
Yeah.
greater than we probably ever experienced.
In our lives, yeah.
Yeah.
So anything you do other than that is better. And then
Anything to
Adrian
avoid
Veidt
that, yeah.
reaches and gets his done.
But I guess
before-
is there a line? There's got to be a line, right? It's not anything you do is better than that.
Well, that's the question.
he just set up as the smartest man on the planet. He's the Lex Luthor. He can
Mhm.
figure
Mhm.
anything out, and he knows the only solution, or the nuclear war will happen.
But I think the idea
That's the doomsday clock
I guess
itself.
my argument would be that yes, he's the world's smartest man. Sure, no way to
Yeah.
measure that, but whatever. But he's incapable of seeing another solution to the problem.
Yeah, and also he also kind of creates the problem. So yeah, you have Dr. Manhattan as a nuclear deterrent, walking nuclear deterrent, right? Then you have the Soviets stockpiling nuclear warheads, but by clouding his vision of the future and then removing him or causing him to get angry and leave to Russia or to the Mars is the only thing that causes Russia to step up their
Yeah,
yeah.
So the idea, if he hadn't been experimenting with tachyons, that would never have happened.
Well,
theoretically,
or
Manhattan would have been able to do something about it.
yeah, exactly, right. There would be something. He's like, well, can you really stop them all? That's a question they say earlier, but like, we never get the impression that he couldn't, right?
But even before he
Yeah.
interferes, like how many minutes is the imaginable doomsday clock? Like what is it set at?
It's at 2 minutes, I think, is the closest we get in the movie anyway.
Right. So I'm just thinking that
Although,
he-
no, that's not true because I think Nixon at one point says, it's time. We're going to do it right now. The Nixon, by the way, sucks. But the nose is
He's okay.
ridiculous.
The nose is ridiculous, but they're trying to make him look like
He looks like
historical figure.
Pinocchio.
well, he may as well. It might have been. I mean,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's fine.
but here in this version, he gets away with everything. So that's why the nose is bigger,
Yeah.
more or less.
You're right. Yeah. what was your point?
I
That
forget, what was I saying?
you were saying that like, well, how close do we get to?
Oh, I'm just saying, like, maybe Adrian, he just looks at that, like the doomsday clock specifically. He knows generally when time is up before war, just someone's going to pull the trigger.
Right. It only takes one stupid person.
So he's working within that window, and he knows no one else is going to find a solution before he ultimately decides on doing his.
Right. So Dan, what do you think?
I think no, like any form of action, if you're choosing to take lives, you can't know whether or not nuclear war. You can't know with enough certainty whether or not it would happen. So if you take action,
And the only person who would know is Dr. Manhattan, or would have more certainty,
right,
is Dr. Manhattan, and you clouded his vision of the future.
Yeah, and so he comes from a place where he thinks no one else can solve the problem. It has to be him, right? So part of that is he's conceited. Obviously,
Right.
he's been told his entire life he's the world's smartest man, and he does feel like he's smarter than everyone else. So he thinks he's the only one who can come up with the solution, and he's not willing to work together. He's working with Manhattan, but he's not revealing all his information to Manhattan. But yeah, no, the choice, the intent to take lives to save other
Right.
lives is wrong.
His in his mind, the choice of inaction is still a choice, I guess, right? By letting by doing nothing, he's letting it happen.
And nobody's saying inaction, right? Nobody's saying don't do anything. It's just don't do that.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, he comes off as a villain at the end, and he should. And I think the movie doesn't do a great job of having Dr. Manhattan not come off like a piece of shit at the end as well. But maybe that's intentional.
Well, no, you say that because he's inhuman, because he doesn't care.
Yeah, well, and then he's like, I understand without condoning
or condemning. I understand.
I understand. Yeah, he comes off like a
coolest.
No,
Coolest
like
line.
it. No,
Awesome.
He comes off just as much as if you disagree with Veidt's decision, his decision to go along with it is not maybe as bad, but close to.
But he's making a decision after the fact, after it has already happened, using the information available. This is the current state. This has already happened.
You're doing a lot of like, I don't know, flips to try to excuse Dr. Manhattan's behavior here at the end of this movie. I think it comes off that way.
I think it's making perfect sense. It's understanding that, again, given the information available, what do we do now going forward? Telling anybody about this takes away the end result, which is this world peace that they achieved, albeit through terrible means.
Exactly.
They did achieve it. Period. So now that it is the case,
see, you come off as sounding like you're saying two different things, because you're like, Veidt's decision, regardless of outcome, is wrong.
yes.
That being said, Manhattan's decision to go along with it, totally fine.
Because
doesn't make those two things are mutually exclusive.
no, they're not. And it's a time constraint, and it's about intent specifically, right? So Manhattan if he knows already that this thing has happened, he can't, as much as he can see time and past and present differently, he can't physically go back and prevent it from happening. So given that it has already happened, what's the best decision moving forward? That's the choice that he's faced with. Veidt's faced with a different choice. He's faced with the choice to deliberately do this thing.
Jeremy, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense how the movie ends and Dr. Manhattan's decision. I'm not saying
it makes sense. It doesn't mean it does. I just don't think it's right.
No, it's certainly callous.
That's the point. I think that's the point everyone is supposed to.
Right, but
take home.
that's what I'm saying is that I think he comes off basically just as poorly as Veidt does at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
And
everyone believes that he murdered millions of people.
Right. No. I'm talking about the way, like, how we perceive it. Not the way that he comes off to the people in the world. How we perceive Dr. Manhattan's decision.
Yeah, it's just an example of his disconnection, even with Laurie. Like, it's an example of that, a breakup that you're feeling with Dr. Manhattan, being a hero, doing all the right things, and then here you're feeling no, like he made the wrong. It's true. That's
yeah. Daniel disagrees, but that's fine.
No, I agree. It's completely a callous and cold choice to make or viewpoint to have.
But that's where Dr. Manhattan has always been heading.
Right.
It's like this higher sense, that we just can't comprehend.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree that he can look very villainous that way.
Okay. Well, anyway, we've said a lot about this movie. I think we can wrap it up there. Normally, if this is a regular film club episode, we'd roll this dice I have in my hand. This die. Don't say it, Daniel.
When it's one, it's just a die.
Shut up,
when it's more
Daniel.
than one, then it's dice.
I'm going to throw it at you. We would roll a die. We would have pre-decided on a list of 6 movies, and let the die decide. Let the fate, a thermodynamic miracle, perhaps.
Wow.
And it's a form of a thermodynamic miracle, right? Or am I
I
misunderstanding?
don't think there's anything miraculous about it. It's just rolling a die.
Right, but the decision that this die makes it can affect.
But we're not rolling it right now, so.
Right, you're right. So why much? I'll just shut up. Anyway, normally we'd roll it, and then that would be the decision for next month's movie. But that movie has already been decided, and it's Mystic River.
Mystic River. You guys, man, you're gonna like this movie. It's a fucking good movie.
I'm sure we will. But will it be a breakfast club? Who knows? Who knows? On that note, follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast as well. Patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. That's the best way to find all of our other content, as well as get access to those movie clubs, including Mystic River or last month's Looper, or others that we've done. And head over to our website, towerbabblepodcast.com or towerbabble.ca. Both will get you to the same place, where you'll find links to everything we do, including Small Screen Star Wars, which is a new show we've just launched to cover The Mandalorian and future Star Wars television content. So find that there, find more details on all of our social media stuff, and we will be back with more of this soon.